I grew up in North Philadelphia, and I lived in a pretty rough area, but I led a kind of dual life because early on I was sent by my mother to special schools for academic achievers. I would say 98% of the children were white, mostly Jewish. So by the time I got into Philadelphia High School for Girls, which is a very prestigious school at that time at least, I was white when I was there and I was black at home, and it was really difficult. I absolutely hated Philadelphia because I felt that everything that was negative in my life was in Philadelphia. And somehow, if I changed venue, everything would be good. And that was the farthest point I knew away from Philadelphia was Los Angeles, coast to coast, so to speak. Well, I originally came here with some theory that I was going to write songs and somehow I was a songwriter. I mean, I thought of myself as I had my 300 and some songs at that time, and I thought I would somehow write songs somewhere and meet somebody. It was just, sort of a young woman fantasy. But what I did after that was live by my wits. I became affiliated with something called the Black Student Alliance, even though I wasn't a student. I met this incredible man named Bunchy, who was the founder and leader of the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party. I knew that I had to do something. Everybody liked the Black Panther Party in the beginning. It was swashbuckling, it was glamorous looking. Well, the mission of the party was well articulated in its 10-point platform and program, and the first point says pretty succinctly, we want freedom. The goal was, in order to become liberated, we would have to create the conditions for a change in the system, what we called revolutionary change. We sold newspapers right away. We learned weapons training. We took political education classes. And eventually, we began to get involved in what we called collectively the survival program, starting with the free breakfast for children. But in the meantime, and most of the time, we defended ourselves against daily assaults by the police. I mean, we were stopped every day. Everything we did was, under surveillance. By January of 1969, two of my closest comrades, including the leader of the chapter, Bunchy, as well as John Huggins, were assassinated at UCLA, and then we all went to jail that day. In that next year of 1969, J. Edgar Hoover had announced, the head of the FBI had announced that the Black Panther Party was the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States, and that he was promising America they wouldn't exist by the end of the year. And we felt that he made every effort. In Los Angeles and in Southern California, we had someone to get killed every month. We went to a funeral every single month. And in Chicago, of course, it ended up that Fred Hampton, who was a great leader of our Illinois chapter, was assassinated along with Mark Clark. Well, Huey Newton was such an iconic figure from the moment I joined the Black Panther Party. By the time I joined the party, that case that Huey had been involved in, where he was charged with having killed a cop, and it shot around the world, the so-called Free Huey movement. The entire country practically was shouting Free Huey, blacks, whites, Latinos, you name it. And I was selected quite arbitrarily and brought up to the central headquarters of the party and told I was going on a trip now as a part of a delegation of journalists that Eldridge had called together. Got on a plane and went to all these different places and wrote about them for our newspaper, what have you. When I arrived in New York, there were a number of my comrades from the New York chapter, and David Hilliard, who was the chief of staff of the Black Panther Party, and here was this man that had been a poster, Huey Newton, waiting at the airport. He was this incredibly beautiful man, very strong, very intelligent looking, totally, powerful. And he gave me ultimately a big hug and said, "Welcome home, comrade." I thought I had died going to heaven. I'd never met anybody so beautiful. And I spoke with him all night, that first night, about, our struggle and what we were doing and why we were doing it. He had been 3 years in prison and had gotten out on an appeal bond, been granted a new trial. I would definitely say he was my leader, and he was my lover for a while. I deemed Huey the only person I would ever say was my leader that I followed with pretty much absolute commitment. Huey became the actual physical leader of the party during the period from 1970 to 1974. When Bobby Seale and I ran for political office in 1973, there had never been any black elected officials in Oakland at the time. It was a pretty much Republican stronghold. We lost that election, so when I took over the reins of the party in 1974, 75, Huey simply, made it clear that he was gone, though people didn't know it at the time. What Huey wanted to do was to continue the agenda he had begun. We had a school, we had a newspaper, I maintained all that. I improved the school, I'm sure. I had to address questions of security, problems in the street, problems from the police. All of those were pretty much running along and moving along. I see the party as an ongoing thing, though it doesn't exist as an entity. We had a commitment. People lost their lives. We can't just act as though that never happened. We were the greatest effort ever made by black people for black liberation.